Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reviews where today we're going to be checking out a couple more tracks from an act named Where the Children Play. The first of those titled Part 8, Nevergaze. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a track on Spotify. This is also on YouTube if you'd like to check that out. I had a look on YouTube. I think it was easy to find them on Spotify. I've previously reviewed their track Part 6, Amberwood, so I'm looking forward to reviewing Nevergaze as well as Where White Winter Resides. So we're going to listen through each of these two tracks from start till finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Start with Nevergaze, let's go. We have lyrics as well to check out near the end. Incredibly ominous with the piano and strings. I'm kind of blown away by how well those kicks are coming through. I'm wondering if they're side-chaining those kicks into the mix. It's something I might try in my own stuff, but they're doing it really well here. I like the tone of the production. Are they side-chaining the whole drum kit? We're sticking with the shrieky vocals, that's cool. Could we have potentially have double tracked those vocals on top just for the chorus part? I like the intensity of the arrangement. Everything is really thick and full sounding, and I love the arrangement behind it, like the backings of the keys, the strings, the guitars, the bass drums, etc. It's just there the vocals I think came through more clearly in the verse part, I suppose. Aside from that, very good though. Very good. Oh? What I like about it is just like how relatively accessible the bass line is. There's like 2 or 3 notes you're going through between each section there. It kind of goes backwards and forwards like the swing of a pendulum, but it's the variation in the way that the drums are played with those really incredibly quick double kicks there with the snare and cymbal and tom patterns going around a stereo field. It's the variations with some of the like lead guitars, like the octachords, whatever we have there, as well as the strings and the key patterns on top in the mid to high ranges. It's the way we do things slightly differently in addition to the main sort of like drive there that's really cool. And the dynamic range and stopping like this as well was really nice for a bit of air. Ah, fantastic crescendo. Fantastic. Very well done. I mean, the machine gun kicks at the end were just absolutely wonderful, but I also appreciate the work that we had with the harmonics and the various sort of like pinches and everything going on the guitars on the sides. I like that we double tracked them and made the most of the articulation there in the mid to high ranges there. We're going to look through the lyrics in a moment. In fact, I've got them just over here. I'm just going to make them big. But I'm very, very, very satisfied with what I've heard so far. I think it's a tremendous effort for sure. So you've got the lyrics of part 8, Nevergaze, kindly provided by Where the Children Play. Look into my eyes, a future so bleak, a heart so cold. Incarcerated in the skin until I drift away. To the cadaver is the limit in this situation. Scream death's melody, never gaze into the eyes of the dead. Oh, crazy, man. So basically, this person stared into the eyes of the dead and they've been cursed and they're stuck in this, and it's kind of like a thing you don't want to get involved with. Is that the kind of the aim of this? My damning name, it stands at the foot of my soul, awaiting my last breath. I wait for the forgotten calling me from the great beyond. Oh, crazy. I hear the grave calling my name, awaiting death's cold embrace. No more tears are shed for it. I mean, this is brutal stuff, man, for sure. I mean, I don't mean that in like the generic, oh, it's brutal because it's metal kind of way. I mean, I legitimately think this is quite intense imagery. What we're discussing is quite visceral, you know. I think it's great. Not laid to rest amongst the nightshades, the plumes of poison fill my body laid. A sweet serene death takes me onward in death's carriage right away. And just the last lines of I can't remain there are vivid. I think that it's wonderful. I mean, like, honestly, like, part 8, Nevergaze, going back to the listening time, because we've got another track to do after this. I'm stoked with it. I remember listening through the Amberwood and being happy with it, but I think this is like a step up. We're definitely in the right direction. It makes me feel very positive about this act. I think in the production alone, it's pretty much commercial grade. Like I wouldn't be surprised if I heard this from like a bigger indie label or something like that specialized within the genre. I'm not sure where these guys are at in regards to that, but I do hope they can find some success because I think, at least from their production alone, they deserve it. The songwriting, though, is incredibly intricate, and there's a lot of really cool stuff going on there from the key parts there with lovely, these wonderful triads and harmonies there played. There's not like an over-expression of those, but enough to add a bit of fluffiness or romanticism to it, which is also enabled by the strings, which are not only like a part of like sort of like black metal and everything like that, as I remember. Like I've heard in a lot of black metal stuff, but that they also add a great sense of sort of emotional tension there. Like there's a beauty that's talked about, like with the poison and the nightshade and being kind of carried away in death's carriage and stuff like that. I think that it simmers nicely alongside the guitar, which is visceral there. Not always, like it's not brutal all the time. There's chugs and power chords and stuff, but then you also have these wonderful string skips, kind of natural sort of harmonic parts there where it chimes and it's very pretty sounding. There weren't any other main sort of lead layers in this track aside from the vocals, but I don't think that we needed that. I think that the guitar parts, in addition to the keys and strings, alongside the bass, which was lovely, phenomenally balanced in the low end there, The drums were just absolutely manic for a lot of the time. It was never predictable. I adore that. I think it's really great. They were heavy as hell. They were punishing, especially those machine gun kicks near the end. Holy crap, they were quick. But it's also just the fact that we had this wonderful stuff going on where we didn't just have the same level of intensity the entire time. We had variations of both the dynamic range as well as the instrumental layers and stuff like that. It felt like we were telling a story. When we were saying Can't Remain near the end, it was your focus wasn't that alongside the mistiness of it. It made you think, and it was wonderfully fragrant. I'm really impressed. We've got track number 2 here, Where a White Winter Resides. Let's go. Let's do it. What we got? Longer track, but I assume it will be worth it. Again, this foley of like a storm, it's just tremendous, you know. It just creates this atmosphere, you know, you feel like you're in the middle of a storm. It's really clever. The guitars are different in this one. Did we double track the guitars in this song? We did. Did we have a different vocal style last time? Because I feel like they're kind of the high shrieks and then this kind of more mid-range stuff. It's a nice foil. If anything from the previous track, I'm glad we're varying the ways we do our vocals in this one. Different types of fry, you know? Flat seconds. There's also this choir in the background there that adds a sense of spirituality despite how like sinister and festering everything is. I think that with this song, you've got a situation where it really benefits from having, I think it would benefit from having like multiple vocal takes, like double tracking the vocals in that chorus section as well. Otherwise, I think that it's a little bit tighter than the previous track there. There is less of the strings and pads we had before. The choir element on top is kind of angelic. It adds a nice bit of glow to that upper range, but it's feral. It's just very, very bombastic. It's very kind of in your face. And it's got this kind of primal kind of like savagery to it that I really enjoy. Just John, you know, those accents on the quarters, on the eighths maybe, and then returning to these acoustics. Wonderful cleans. Halftime? And back to that Foley. Excellent. You could have potentially also put like a, I mean, this might be something that's a bit overdone or cliched, but you could have also potentially put like a little like bass drop there, like, forgive me if this has been unorthodox, like an 808, just dum, just to kind of really kind of help that hit just a little bit harder. But again, I still think it sounds great. Ah, fantastic. Nice adjustment of the guitar lines there. And phenomenal. The reverb tails and the pianos are gorgeous there. And a fade out to end. No, I've got no real complaints about it. I think that this was another really sensational song in addition to part 8. I think that we nailed the aesthetic there. Again, the Foley made it more cinematic and more kind of like intriguing. We're going to talk about that more in a moment. Just check out the lyrics for this one. Yeah, where a white winter resides, lyrics for this one. Alone my shadow doesn't even follow, waiting for a sun that doesn't even rise. Accompanied by my sadness, enslaved by my sorrow, bound and dragged like a slave to the pyre. Hearts hung high to dry it in the earth that once housed me, now tomb for my rotting flesh. So we talked about previously being like stuck in our body and being taken somewhere else. Is that like a continuous theme? The idea of being taken away from our body, like our current situation, for death to be a sweet release or something like that? I'm not quite sure, you know. Where winter resides inside my frozen heart, can you hear the screams from within? They beg the ground to part and for my hands to be released. Damn, no one will pull me out. Brutal, dude. Am I as useless as the snow on the ground, left to wither away? Can you hear the screams? Save us from our darkest chambers. One bullet left, I fire in the sky. How could you condemn me here? Damn, man. Not even a god cared enough only to make a mockery of me. Alone and stranded I weep. Oh, okay, I think I get this one. So with Where White Winter Resides, I think it's kind of an allegory or like a discussion about the way that they feel internally, like psychologically, the stuff that they're dealing with, you know, their place in the world, how they feel about themselves and the situation they're in, that kind of coldness inside our hearts and everything like that we can feel, especially when we're going really fucked up, you know, it's like we've been hurt or like terrible stuff's happened. I think it's really interesting stuff to write about. I think it's a really creative, poetic way to discuss it. I think that we were able to talk about stuff we were going through in a way where it didn't seem like it was kind of trying to be too accessible, which might seem like a detriment, but ironically, I think it's actually better because sometimes if you're too blunt about the stuff you're going through, it can be a bit off-putting. You know, people have got their own problems, right? But when you make it poetic, it's more kind of pretty, and you kind of like feel like a bit academic trying to figure it out, which is kind of nice. But the track itself, with the culminate, like the Winter of Foley, the snowstorm with the guitar, it's just those lone acoustics, like the twin acoustics recorded at the start, moving into the guitars, bass, and drums were absolutely tremendous. And then, you know, we just continued from there. You know, we continued by having the vocals come back on top in a similar way to the previous track. We had some choir vocals as well, which layered nicely on top. I think as well the keys at the end are a nice way to fade stuff out. We had a lot of variety with different guitar riffs and grooves and stuff. Like, we're going to talk about some more overall comments in the conclusion, but I just want to sort of elaborate on the fact that I think that this was another really well-written track. There was no filler within the 5 minutes 43. A lot of the comments I have about, like, you know, double tracking the vocals, but we'll talk about this more in the conclusion. As welcome to the conclusion of my review with these two tracks from an act named Where the Children Play, titled, as I understand it, Nevergaze and Where White Winter Resides. Now, these two tracks, I've spoken about it individually in the track comment sections, but as I understand it from memory, the song Nevergaze is about staring into death and getting cursed by that, and the only release being the sweet embrace of death and being taken by the carriage and stuff like that. Where White Winter Resides is about someone dealing with the struggles internally, psychologically, feeling cold inside like nothing can save them, and just wondering if they're worthless as the snow on the ground. I think that both of these two stories are interesting. I'm sure there will be people that relate to it, especially if they're fans of the genre and are similar to dissimilar stories being told. So I think there's definitely an audience for it. I think that the vocal style was fantastic. It was great to have a bit more range, forgive me if I'm wrong, with the way we did the vocals. Like the vocal fry had like kind of shriek stuff in both, and then we had some sort of mid-range kind of throatier stuff happening in Where White Winter Resides. It was nice to have the variation between those vocal styles in there. I still, as I've said before, would have liked to have double tracking in the chorus sections for both of these tracks, just for a bit more oomph with those, but I understand as well that we might have wanted the music to sort of sound like it was smothering us, so that's totally fine. I mean that genuinely, by the way. It can be more kind of like symbolic of what you're dealing with if that power, that passion from that music is overwhelming you in the mix. The tracks are about 4.5 to 5.5 minutes respectively. They're not short. They're outside of the 2 to 4 minutes sweet spot, but I can say honestly like that we did not overstay our welcome with either of those two. There was no filler. The structuring of the tracks was interesting, even though we didn't sort of typically have a lot of variation with the bass lines and necessarily even the chord progressions. There were several distinct sections per track. We expressed our instruments that we had each differently. Each served a purpose that was both functional and worthwhile to include. And I just think that we made the most of those instruments as well for the most part. There are a few key instruments I think especially excelled throughout these two tracks. The first is the drums. The drums were absolutely just wonderful. They were incredible. They were just wild, man. I don't even know how we figured out how we decided to do half of it. Like, it's incredibly creative. And just the finesse and intensity of it when it needed to be heavy was just incredible. But we also knew just to come down to those chord note kicks or high eighth note kicks occasionally as well. So we had an understanding of what was appropriate. We pocketed when we needed to. And everywhere else, it either wasn't there or was just full bore, and I was all for it, man. I love it. It's incredible stuff. Very difficult technical drums, but still very, very, very interesting. The guitar parts were fantastic. It wasn't just like chugs or like the clean acoustic guitar parts at the start of Where White Winter Resides. There were some incredible like lead lines there were soaked in reverb, including some interesting sort of octave chordal bits in the first track. And we also had like just this wonderful sort of juicy power chords and stuff to add us moving forward there. We didn't rely too much on this like accidentals or chromatics. We had occasional flat second chords in the high register there for a bit of kind of sassiness, as well as some interesting harmonic passages there in the breaks, but ultimately the guitars were really well fleshed out and layered nicely alongside the drums. Bass guitar was in there. It was less noticeable. I think it was more of a sort of a supporting thing in the bottom there, and I think that's all it really needed to do, so I'm more than happy with what the bass was doing. The keys were wonderful. They were intricate in the mid-range there. They weren't overplaying. They're typically stuck to eighths or quarters, and the right hand was especially prevalent more so than the left, which is totally fine because that might have been taken up by the lower mid-ranges and other instruments. The strings that we had in the first track there, they were wonderfully kind of freight patterned, and like they added a nice bit of mid to high range resonance there with the extensions of the triads within the harmonies, and those were kind of mirrored by some of the choir-ish parts that were happening in Where White Winter Resides. So I'm glad we had a similar sort of expression of that range, just considering the variance of the instrumental ingredients there. I mean, I think ultimately these were tracks where the vocals were the focal point. You had kind of pseudo leads there from like guitars in there by themselves, and maybe like the keys kind of fading out there and stuff like that, but mostly the vocals were the focal point. I think that's fine. I don't think we necessarily needed to add any sort of dedicated solo sections in order to make it work there. Again, there was enough variation within the tracks compositionally and structurally. And I think that the vocals were interesting enough on their own, even if I didn't necessarily get the words clearly. I'm glad I had a lyric guide there to be able to sort of double check stuff. But aside from that, I think that the performances in general were very tight. The themes overall were vivid and vicious, and they relied on the heaviness of the guitar parts there. The piano and I think the strings and the choir parts were trying to make it sound a little bit sort of like a little bit pretty. There's a sense of beauty with some of those reverb-laden parts here that contrasted neatly with the guitars and in a way which kind of balanced it out a little bit, but then the drums were just so prolific and just so like just incredibly heavy that it kind of sort of slammed you back down to earth there. And the vocal style clearly sort of suited the vibe of someone. Like, we were trying to make the metal that we were listening to palatable, but we also wanted to sort of communicate the evisceration of our soul and the dreadful situation we're in. I think that the chord choices we had there, as well as the melodies and some of the sort of like uncomfortable positions with those flat second chords and other bits, were very welcoming. And the Foley as well, with the wind and like the start of Where the White Winter Resides, was also very effective for setting the mood. But I mean, the studio recording, mixing, and mastering was typically pretty tight. I was really happy with the first track. I think the second track was done well too. There was just something about the way that those drums cut in the first track that I don't necessarily know if we had in the second. I think we might have realized we might have been sort of maybe cutting a little bit too much with the side chaining of the kicks and stuff into the mix. But I mean, aside from that, I think that's still very heavy, bit of raw and roughness in a mix ain't a bad thing in this kind of genre of music. If it sounds too sort of overproduced, it starts to become I don't think it doesn't sound as like authentic, you know. I'm not trying to be rocktivist about it. It's just, you know, you don't want it to be too clean or else it sounds a little bit kind of sterile, and we didn't have that here. I think they managed to have the heaviness there and still record, mix and master it really well. I mean, like, things were nice and wide in the stereo field. There were no weird resonant frequencies in the frequency spectrum. There was definitely dynamic range. The track just paused sometimes and things were silent, and they came up. There was automation both going up and then down at the end of Where White Winter Resides, like with the piano there. But it was still nice and loud without pumping, so the bus compression and limiting was handled. I mean, effectively, all right, and the vocals were produced quite well too. I think that they were typically very present in the mix. For the final time, I think they could have been double tracked in the chorus, but I've said that already, so I feel like saying that for a fifth time would not be great. But thank you for watching my review of these tracks from an act named Where the Children Play, and hopefully you enjoyed them. If you did, please go check them out via their various social medias, digital streaming platforms, including Spotify and YouTube. And stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need to help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I will catch you in the next review. Spiderhands out.